So back to the Israel-Palestine conflict. Again, I know a lot of people have different perceptions on how this all works, how it all is. Um, Throughout the last 70 years, a lot of damage has been done to both communities and in Israel and Palestine and the surrounding regions. So I want to make sure to incorporate that. And I come from this basically with the understanding that I disapprove of all sorry, that's my phone, of violence to solve conflicts. Um, and there's a lot of terrorism in that region, a lot of horrible things that should never have happened. Targeting of civilians by any side is not right. That's not the way to deal with things. But I'm just trying to give you a background to why these things have happened and what we can do about them now and the role of the United States in all these conflicts. So I'm going to start with the, the late 1800s and what has happened there. So in the late 1800s, there was a guy named Theodore Herzl who was a Jewish person. I think he was living in Europe or United States. Doesn't really matter, but he brought up this idea of what if we had the Jewish people moving back to Israel, like the land of Canaan. So let me bring up a map of where this is. Okay, so talking about the Middle East now. That's a pretty good one. Okay, so sorry, a little delay here, but I'm going to be bringing back up a map of the Middle East, how it is today. Hold on, where are you? Everything's being a little difficult. So, dude, all right, so you can see this now. So we have Turkey, Iraq, Iran. So all these countries that you see right now did not exist basically in like 70 years ago. Um, what you see now that might be familiar is we have Israel right here in the blue. Right here. And we have this little area in orange, which is actually the West Bank, and some area right here, which is not shown, which is Gaza. So what happened in roughly 1918 is that all these areas got divided, and there was some guy in Britain named Balfour wrote what's called the Balfour Declaration, which he decided that there should be a home for Jewish people. So Jewish people at this time, there were very few in living in this actual region. Where did they live? So they lived all throughout the world. There were a lot in Egypt. There were some down here in Ethiopia. There was some living in Iran, and there were a lot living in Europe. So in Western Europe, in Germany, Poland, and what sort. But in these areas, the Jews were very mistreated because they were different. They had a different religion other than Christianity. And to some extent, they had difficulty living here because they were not Muslims. So, to many people, they wanted a homeland where they could be celebrating the Jewish language, Hebrew from the text, and also their religion. The problem arose when Theodor Herzl invited a lot of people through his writings to move to the homeland, and so many people were moving there. But the problem, I guess, is that many people live there. So there's a big discrepancy in typically people believe about this. So imagine this: like we, the Leahys, have a lot of Irish heritage, but what if we decided that there was a lot of people mistreating Irish people here, which there isn't right now, but there used to be in the past. Like in the 1800s, a lot of times Irish people had a problem getting jobs and whatnot. Like even signs saying Irish people need not apply. So, but imagine that was happening today. Like, what would we do? So we'd have the choice of living in the United States with a lot of discrimination, or trying to move back to Ireland. Now, if we move back to Ireland, the problem would be that people live there already. So what would we do with those people? Would we try to set up our own thing or try to kick them out of the area and whatnot? So a lot of the Jews that initially moved back to Israel settled in places where nobody was living, because it's a lot of desert region, a lot of like in between desert regions, so like a lot of like dry regions where nobody wanted to live. But then there's a lot of places that people already lived in. Now the people that lived in there are referred to as Palestinians. So people have lived in Palestine, which is the name of the region. Palestine is the name of the region. So going forth, that's what that's called. So a lot of people were there, and they were kind of kicked out of the places that they lived in to live to the east or to the south. Now, if they lived to the east, they were moving to Gaza. When they were leaving to the south, they were moving to the Gaza Strip. So give me a moment. I'm going to draw up a map of that to help us understand like where all those places are. A lot of like the way this map looks is going to influence the way we think about this. So okay, gotta go in here. So what you see right here is a map of Israel and Palestine, and the light colored beige region is what most of the country considers, most of the world rather, considers Israel. And the dark beige region is other countries and what we call Palestine or Palestine occupied places. Now, those who occupy the two Palestine places, which were the West Bank right here, that area, and the Gaza Strip, are referred to as the PLO. Now, the PLO is the Palestine Liberation Organization. It translates into something else with their language, right? So now, when the British Empire first divided the region, they divided it into Israel and Palestine with two separate regions. This is not the only place in the world where this happened. When they divided upon the independence of India, India got divided in between what we know as India today and two separate regions known as East Pakistan and Pakistan. East Pakistan eventually became known as Bangladesh, became its own country. Pakistan also became its own country. And that was also not without war, but this one became a war situation. So as you can see, the West Bank is very close to Jordan. Now, since then, Israel and Jordan have normalized relations. They kind of get along. The people involved in Jordan are pretty good people. Like they still have a king and stuff, but they still have a democracy and it's like a well-run place. Egypt is a little messy, but still they have normalized relations with Israel. Um, their government is not so good, but same thing with the like all that region. Like they're not perfect and whatnot. The problem with Israel, and this is where I want to separate the idea of like being Israeli from the idea of being a Jewish person. So the important thing about this is condemnation of Israel itself does not equate to anti-Semitism. So I'm going to write that out here. Having a problem with the Israeli government and having a problem with Israel or having a problem with Jews, rather, Jews living there, all that is not the same thing. There are many people living in Israel, and I met some of them. I had a teacher who was from there, do not approve of the Israeli government. The Israeli government is run by a dictator, pretty much this guy, Benjamin Netanyahu. Um, he's been ruling for decades, has a lot of power, and he is not treating people of other regions very nicely. That's my opinion. So I want to separate my opinion from the fact, but it's hard to discuss this without separating these two. So let's take a look at these regions. So these regions were initially divided up by the Allied powers after World War One and somewhat after World War Two. So like all these things are intertwined. World War One and World War Two are not entirely separate. It's kind of part of a same ongoing war, and it affects regions to this day. And it's very sad, and but it does. But so these regions are separated. You can see there's a dotted line. So what does the dotted line mean? Does it mean that these two things are separate countries? Some people believe so, and some people don't. So about half the world believes the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, as you see them on this map, are part of the same country known as Palestine, and others don't recognize them as being part of a country at all. Our country has always been on the side of Israel. Now, here's the problem. So we have more people of Jewish descent and people from Israel and so forth living in the United States. So it's more politically savvy to be part of the movement that agrees with Israel. So every single president since the forming of Israel in 1948 has been on the side of Israel, regardless of whether or not they do. But Israel, as a state, as a country, as a military, has performed many actions which are extremely unfair to the people living around. So the people living in West Bank or Gaza Strip, their ancestors have been living there for many, many centuries. Most of them are pretty peaceful people. But when people are antagonized, when people are bothered, when their homes start to be taken over, people get violent. Um, so the way I look at this is like imagine somebody came to your house and said, you can't live here. What are the options you have? You can give into it, or you can become an extremist or anywhere in between. So a lot of these extremists became what we know as terrorists who have used bombs and many violent means to combat this. I'm strictly a nonviolent person. I don't approve any violent action, but I do understand somebody getting to that point. So, when somebody's in your home trying to kick you out or your relatives, like joining a military operation to bomb other places, if it draws you to that, I do on a little level understand why that is. This is not without history, is not without merit. From 1948, that's a long time ago, to well, this year when this happened, 2023, there are many people who have tried to, from the Palestinian regions, tried to make a statement through violence. And there's also many people from those people places who have tried to make a statement through wherever they can, protest, Facebook, anything. But it comes to the point where people get so fed up about their treatment that they do something very, very extreme. It's not right. It's not right. It's not right to kidnap people. It's not right to behead people or any. Of course, we don't know all that, but like, it's important to understand why this happened. So many decades before that, up until now, there have been many attacks on the Israeli region. So primarily, they've been happening in areas I've been circling here. So very populated regions such as around Jerusalem, which is a highly like contested area. Tel Aviv, also very highly contested. The previous attempts here have been around this region, right around Gaza. Now, what I'm talking about here is like a lot more complex than like what I'm saying. There's been many wars involving these regions and a lot of what they call terrorist attacks and attempts against it. So, but the idea is here is that you have a lot of people moving to a region who their parents and their grandparents didn't actually live here, but they have some kind of connection to here through religion and are moving in places and kicking out people who have been there for many, many years. It would be as if this. So I'm going to make a parallel analogy, and you can agree or disagree with this, not, but our land, the land of the United States, really does belong to the Native Americans. So whatever Native Americans or American Indians, or whatever you want to call them, belong to the region of New Jersey. Now imagine the descendants of these people come up to your house step and kick you out forcefully. Like say they bring an army with them, say they bring guns, say you have to leave. What are you going to do? You're going to leave. And you're going to move to someplace else close by and say like to yourself, like, why did I get kicked out? This is wrong. And you would be within the right to say that because yes, it was wrong for your ancestors. It was wrong for your white ancestors to kick you out of your home, but it's not right for the people today to move into your home and kick you out violently. That's what's happening. So the people who live in the Palestinian region, so I'm talking about all this region right here, their families from decades, 100 years ago, have always been there. And then now there's people who have been before there trying to move into the region saying, this is our land. You see the problem. So both people have a claim to the land, but the more people who have a claim to the land are the people who have been there for a few generations, whereas the people who have been from generations past have less of a claim to it. And it's wrong for them to be there. So what you have happening right now is that lots of people who have less of a claim to land are moving into these lands. So you have people who are Jewish people who only go back a few generations or even one generation are moving from here and they're moving into regions here and making settlements. They're making little towns and they're saying this is our land. So essentially kicking people out and not just moving in there, but it's violent. And they're also going in here. The bigger problem is right here. Now, this looks like a very small piece of land, and it is. That's the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip is a very, very small piece of land where anywhere from 2 million to 2.5 million people live. It's about the size of three Howells. So if you took the size of three Howells and just put it there and tried to squeeze 2.5 million people there, that's where they live. Imagine trying to live on three Howells of land. Now, first of all, it's arid. It's very dry there. You have to have your farms there. You have to have your power plants there. You have to have a water system there. Um, and it is Israeli occupied, which means that it's not a separate region. Israel controls what goes in and out of Gaza with little input from Egypt. So now Egypt, they could place people or resources inside of that. So if they saw that Gaza was running out of water or gas, they could bring people in there. But they can't because the Israeli military blocks that. So they have a say in what goes in and out of there. So bringing it around to today, this is what happened. So there have been many military conflicts of people who felt that this whole situation wasn't fair because it's essentially a prison. It's a prison essentially the size of three Howells, where people can't bring in or bring out food or other things of their choice. They all have to go through Israel or Egypt, and the Egypt government is very solid, and so is the Israel border. People get fed up, and when people get fed up, it does lead to ugliness and terrorism, which is exactly what happened. So, the Gaza is not controlled by good people. It's controlled by what most of the world considers a terrorist organization called Hamas. That's Hamas. They call most of the shots around there, but Hamas does not represent the Gaza people. Never, ever, ever, ever has any particular government controlled the will of the people. We had a government in 2016 to 2020 controlled by Trump, but never, ever will we Trump. There's always millions and millions of people who disagree with what the government's doing, and no government speaks for what the people are doing. So regardless of how bad a government is, it's never right to bomb the people. That's never right. Again, my opinion speaking, but that's how I feel. So in I'm gonna say October. I think it's October. A lot of people from Hamas, who is the terrorist organization governing Gaza, went into Israeli regions. I think it was around here. That went in and kidnapped and killed a lot of people and brought them back to Gaza. And the Israeli response to that was to go in. I'm not going to criticize the fact that there needs to be a response. Obviously, you need to do something. But their first response was pretty much to kill a lot of people in Gaza. Again, this is a very densely populated region. This is not desert there. This city. This Gaza Strip is basically a huge city made of 2 to 2.5 million people, taking about the size of three Howells. I looked up the stats on this. That's what they occupy. They started bombing Gaza and telling people to move south so they don't get involved in the bombing. Now, you don't do that. Let's say if there's a major crime event happening in Brooklyn, you wouldn't say, okay, all the good people in Brooklyn move out so we could bomb all the bad people in Brooklyn. And I use Brooklyn as an example because Brooklyn has about 2.5 million people. You don't do that. That's evil. So when they bombed, they killed a lot of women and children. And when I say a lot, I mean, up to this point, it's at least 2,000 people. Not 2,000, 20,000. Imagine that number. That's more than the soldiers killed in Iraq. That is about 6 times more killed in the bombing of the World Trade Center. That's how many people they killed. Indiscriminately, they just bombed them. Later on, I'm going to send you a picture which shows the words from a lot of Israeli people in power about what they feel about this region. A lot of people like want to obliterate this entire region for religious purposes and purposes of their country. What they don't understand is that if they just lay their arms down and just talk to these people, how much it can do, but they don't want to do that. The people in charge of Israel are evil, and anybody who goes along with this, including their army, are committing mass genocide of these people. Their goal is to completely obliterate and kill every single Muslim Arab living in the Gaza Strip. And once they finish that, they're going to go with the West Bank as well. It is extremely difficult situation because a lot of people in America don't want to say anything against it, because once you say something against it, you're considered anti-Semitic. I'm not an anti-Semite. Many of my friends are Jewish. I have people who live in Israel who are against this completely, but the government is very, very wrong and very, very evil for promoting this. And the way I feel about our United States government right now, I can't honestly support anyone who supports this. And both Democrats and Republicans for many years have fully supported Israel without any reservations whatsoever. And Biden's a part of this. So I will not vote for Biden. I will not vote for Trump. I will vote for a third party above this. But this is genocide. This is the thing we always spoke against. This is the thing we would say, let us never, ever happen again. This is the same thing that happened against Jews in World War II. And there are people in Israel who are committing the same atrocities. And notice to say people, I didn't say Jews, because there are many, many Jews who are completely against this and completely are ashamed of their government. This is the atrocities of a particular government, and this needs to stop. And so I invite you to form your own opinions on this and look up anything I said, but this is the way I feel, and this is a very serious situation. And I thank you for listening.